Chapter 1. The Summons to Dorset. The letter arrived on a damp October morning, slid discreetly beneath Hercule Poirot's door by the polite but taciturn concierge of his London apartment building. It bore the mark of a country solicitor, heavy parchment, thick with the scent of pipe smoke and ink, and was addressed in a firm, masculine hand. Poirot opened it with the precision of a surgeon. He read it twice, then once more, aloud. Monsieur Poirot, I write on behalf of my client, the Honourable Charles Darnley of Vendôme House, Dorset. A matter has arisen concerning the sudden disappearance of a young woman from the estate under circumstances most unsettling. My client requests your immediate assistance. Kindly telephone at your earliest convenience. A motor car shall be sent should you accept this most urgent invitation. Respectfully, Edward Marchbanks, solicitor. Poirot's gaze drifted out the window to where the London fog was curling like a shroud over the rooftops. A young woman vanished from a stately country house? It was almost too perfectly the setting for mischief, perhaps even murder. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Life in London had grown altogether too quiet. By early afternoon he was seated in the back of a dark green Bentley, winding through the Dorset countryside. Miss Felicity Lemon, his punctilious secretary, had declined the invitation. "Country air ruins my skin," she had declared. But Poirot was not without company. Inspector James Japp, retired though never quite off duty, had insisted on tagging along, out of what he called a hunch and boredom. "Tell me, Poirot," Japp said, pulling at the brim of his bowler, "why do these rich folks always wait until a girl's gone missing to invite Scotland Yard? Or you?" "Mon ami," Poirot replied, leaning back in the leather seat, "because they do not wish the scandal until it is no longer avoidable, and because they believe always that it will all resolve itself. Only when the illusion crumbles do they send for Hercule Poirot." They arrived at Vendôme House in the fading light of day. It was a grey-stoned Georgian estate, surrounded by yew hedges and looming oak trees, the type of house that seemed to hold its breath. A maid in a starched uniform greeted them at the door and led them into a drawing-room that was altogether too quiet for a household in turmoil. It was there they met Charles Darnley, a tall, aristocratic man with a hawk-like nose and weary eyes, and his wife, Lady Genevieve Darnley, whose face seemed carved from marble. They did not rise when the guests entered, nor did they offer tea. That, Poirot noticed, was the first sign of discord. "You've heard of the disappearance, I presume?" Charles Darnley asked, offering no introduction. Poirot nodded. "Only that a young woman is missing? I presume someone of the household?" Lady Darnley spoke for the first time, her voice precise and cold. "Miss Iris Marsh. She was our companion, our secretary, if you like. Employed here for just over 2 years. Quiet girl, reliable. She did not return from a walk yesterday afternoon, nor did she leave a note or carry any luggage. Her bedroom has not been disturbed." "May I see it?" Poirot asked gently. Lady Darnley hesitated, then rang a bell. The same silent maid reappeared. "Take Monsieur Poirot and Inspector Japp to the Marsh girl's room." The bedroom was small but neat, with floral wallpaper and a single suitcase stored at the foot of the bed. Poirot immediately noticed the neatness, not a book out of place, a scarf draped just so. And yet he observed the faint trace of a muddy footprint by the window. The latch, too, was unfastened. "She did not leave through the door," he murmured. "She left, or was made to leave, by this window." "Could have gone out for a midnight stroll and lost her way," Japp offered, though his tone lacked conviction. Poirot turned to the writing desk. The blotter revealed the faint imprint of a letter written, torn out and taken. He held the paper to the light and read the reverse imprint. "You must tell them. If not, I will." "Mon Dieu," Poirot said softly. "There is more to this than the vanishing of a mere secretary. There is blackmail, perhaps a threat. Someone was desperate enough to stop this young woman from speaking." He turned to Jap. "And now, my friend, we must interview the household. Everyone who knew Mademoiselle Marsh. There is no time to waste. The game has already begun." As they returned downstairs, the house seemed somehow more silent than before. Poirot paused before a faded portrait in the corridor. A young woman in 19th century dress, her eyes downcast. "Who is this?" he asked the maid. She looked uncomfortable. "Miss Margaret Darnley, sir, the master's sister. Died young. They say she drowned. 40 years ago, but she's not often spoken of." Poirot filed this away. Every house has its ghosts, but some ghosts, he knew, liked to walk again. Back in the drawing room, the Darnleys had been joined by a young man, fair-haired, sharp-jawed, and dressed in riding tweeds. "My nephew," Charles said, without enthusiasm. "Nigel Darnley. He was close to Miss Marsh. She was fond of horses." Poirot noted the subtle past tense. "Mr. Darnley, perhaps you could tell me when you last saw Mademoiselle Marsh?" Nigel blinked. "Yesterday, just after breakfast. She was talking about taking a walk to the wood by the north field. I didn't think anything of it." "And you were fond of her?" He flushed. "She was pleasant company, that's all." Jap raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Poirot smiled politely. "Merci. That will be all for now." As the clock chimed 7, Poirot stood by the great bay window, looking out at the gathering mist. Somewhere out there, a girl had vanished, but Poirot felt sure, no, he knew, she had not gone willingly. There was a darkness here, behind the polished veneer, and it had only just begun to show itself. He touched the window glass, cold, unforgiving. "The truth," he murmured, "has a way of rising. Always." Chapter 2. Shadows in the fog. The morning fog at Vendôme House did not lift. It clung low across the grounds like a secret no one wished to share, wrapping trees in gauze and softening the world into silence. Hercule Poirot stood in the breakfast room, poring over his boiled egg and black coffee with the same focus he gave a confession or clue. Jap appeared beside him, shaking the rain from his coat. "Fog's thick as soup out there. If Miss Marsh went wandering in that, it's no wonder she got lost." Poirot took a delicate sip from his cup. "And yet, mon ami, I do not believe that is what happened." Jap raised an eyebrow. "Still hung up on the letter imprint?" Poirot nodded. "A threat. A warning. One does not write such things over breakfast unless one fears being silenced." Charles Darnley entered, as immaculate as ever in a pressed cravat and morning coat. "You will wish to speak to the rest of the household, I presume?" "Oui," Poirot replied. "Immediately, if you please. It is best to hear their accounts while memory is still fresh and nerves not yet rearranged." Charles gestured towards the drawing room. "They are all assembled." The household, when gathered, presented a tableau of uncomfortable politeness. Lady Darnley perched rigidly in an armchair, her hands folded in her lap. Nigel leaned against the mantel, his jaw tense. Two others were introduced, Miss Marigold Beamish, the housekeeper, grey-haired and flinty-eyed, and Dr. Lionel Keswick, a guest of the family, young and amiable, with a habitual look of distraction. Poirot stood in the centre of the room like a conductor before an orchestra. "Mesdames et messieurs, it is my task to find the truth. Mademoiselle Marsh has vanished. I ask for your honesty, however inconvenient it may be." Miss Beamish sniffed. She was a plain girl, quiet. She did her work and didn't interfere, but she kept a journal if that's of any interest. I found it in her bureau drawer, unlocked, mind you. Jap leaned forward. You read it? A few lines, yes. She wrote about truths buried and having the strength to bring things to light. Nonsense, really. But she had the look of someone who saw more than she said. Poirot took the small notebook handed to him, brown leather, worn at the corners. He did not open it yet. Instead, he turned to Dr. Keswick. I understand you are a friend of the family, Doctor. Old school friend of Nigel's, Keswick replied, raking a hand through his blonde hair. I've visited often. I liked Iris. She was quiet, yes, but intelligent, poised. Poirot's eyes glinted. And did she confide in you? Keswick hesitated. Once, a few months ago, she asked about the effects of poison. Not in a morbid way, said it was for a short story she was writing. Poirot exchanged a glance with Jap, who mouthed silently. Poison? Poirot turned next to Nigel. Monsieur, you said you last saw her after breakfast. Did you speak? Nigel gave a short nod. She said she was going to the woods. She seemed unsettled. I thought she needed air. Unsettled? Poirot prodded. He sighed. She asked me something strange, if I believed people could change the past. I laughed. She didn't. Lady Darnley cleared her throat. Miss Marsh was imaginative. We indulged her interest in writing and such, but I fear she let fancies get the better of her. Poirot's gaze fixed on her. Madame, do you know what she meant to bring to light? There was a pause. Too long. I've no idea, she said smoothly. I'm afraid she wasn't as forthcoming with me as she may have been with the others. Poirot's fingers drummed lightly against the notebook. Then perhaps the answers lie here. He opened the journal slowly. The entries were terse, dated, and often cryptic, but one stood out, written 3 days before her disappearance. Saw him again in the library. Same book, same seat. Eyes like winter. He knows I know. Poirot shut the book with a snap. Someone here frightened her. Jap folded his arms, and if she was planning to reveal something, blackmail perhaps, that gives motive. Indeed, Poirot murmured, and perhaps cause for silence. As the interviews ended, Poirot requested to see the grounds. A servant, young and nervous, led them through the garden and into the mist-choked trees beyond. The wood was dense, the path muddy and meandering. After 15 minutes they reached a clearing where a bench sat beside a mossy stone wall. This is where she liked to walk, said the servant. Sat here for hours sometimes. Poirot bent to examine the ground. A cigarette butt, unfiltered, still bearing a faint red lipstick stain, lay near the bench. Nearby, the disturbed earth suggested someone had fallen or been dragged. And yet, Poirot whispered, no footprints leading back. Suddenly, from the far end of the clearing, a figure emerged, startled, cloaked, breathless. It was Miss Beamish. I sometimes come here, she stammered. I like the solitude. Jap narrowed his eyes. Odd time for a stroll, isn't it? She looked away. I didn't know anyone was here. Poirot did not press. He simply picked up the cigarette and placed it in a paper envelope. Back at the house, he turned to Jap as they removed their coats. There is more than one story here, my friend, he said. Someone watches. Someone lies. And someone fears the truth. And where do we begin? Jap asked. Poirot looked toward the east wing, where a door had just closed with a soft click. With the past, he replied. Always with the past. Chapter 3. The Whispering Walls. The east wing of Vendôme House had long fallen into disuse. The grand ballroom, once alive with music and candlelight, now stood shuttered and silent. The corridor smelled faintly of dust and lavender polish, and the faded portraits watched like patient sentinels as Poirot and Japp entered with the housekeeper's reluctant permission. "This part of the house hasn't been lived in for years," Miss Beamish had said. "Lady Darnley keeps it closed. Sentimental reasons, I expect." But Poirot had insisted. He moved slowly, observing everything, the warped floorboards, the spider-webbed sconces, the scent of old wood, and something less pleasant. Mildew? No decay. The detective paused before a door with a brass handle, slightly ajar. Inside, the room was dim, curtains half drawn. A child's cot stood near the window, long disused. Toys lay carefully arranged on a shelf, faded cloth animals, a wooden horse missing a wheel. On the wall above the fireplace hung a photograph in a silver frame, a girl of about 8, seated in a wicker chair, staring solemnly at the camera. Poirot turned to Japp. "This wing tells a story no one wants to remember." "Ghosts?" Japp muttered. "Oui, but not the kind that knock over vases, the kind that keep secrets." They moved to the library next, a grand space with high ceilings, towering shelves, and the aroma of aged paper. Poirot immediately sought out the seat mentioned in Iris Marsh's diary, the one he always took. Third row, leather wingback, overlooking the rose garden. He studied the books on the shelf behind it, mostly history, politics, and several volumes of family genealogy. One was newer than the rest, a recent publication on Victorian scandals. Poirot drew it from the shelf. Between pages 70 and 71, he found something curious, a torn scrap of notepaper with a short line. "Margaret never jumped." "Margaret," Japp repeated. "Didn't the maid say there was a sister who drowned?" Poirot nodded slowly. "Yes, Margaret Darnley, 40 years ago." He looked around, his mind swiftly assembling fragments like a puzzle, the neglected wing, the photograph, the journal entries, and now this note. The family claims she drowned, perhaps, but this suggests otherwise. Never jumped implies suicide? Or that someone wanted it to look that way. "Cover-up?" Japp said. "Possibly. And now Iris Marsh has uncovered something. She threatens to reveal it, and she disappears." They left the library and returned to the hall where Charles Darnley waited, smoking by the fire. "You've been exploring," he said coolly. "Nostalgia or suspicion?" Poirot's reply was polite but firm. "Curiosity, monsieur, often the first step to truth." Charles exhaled. "Then you'll want to know the family scandal. Margaret was my sister. She died young. Officially she drowned in the ornamental lake, but there were rumors that she was pregnant, that it wasn't an accident, the sort of whispers old families try to forget." "And Iris Marsh was investigating this?" Poirot asked. "I believe so," Charles admitted. "She asked questions, dug through old letters. I warned her to leave it alone. It wasn't relevant to her work. She didn't listen." "Did she ever mention a name?" Japp asked. Charles hesitated. "Only once. Lionel, I assume she meant Dr. Keswick. He spent hours in the library. They often spoke." Poirot filed the detail. "Merci. That will be most useful." After lunch, Poirot requested a private word with Dr. Keswick. They met in the conservatory, its glass walls misted with condensation. Rain tapped gently above them. "Doctor," Poirot began, "you and Mademoiselle Marsh were acquainted beyond mere civility." Keswick nodded, uneasy. "Yes, we spoke often. She was intelligent, inquisitive, but recently she became obsessed." "With what?" "The past. Specifically Margaret Darnley. She believed Margaret had been murdered, that the family covered it up. She even found old records, letters, I think, hidden in a hollow book spine. She never showed them to me, but she said if something happened to her, I should tell someone." Poirot sat forward. Did she say whom she suspected? Keswick swallowed. She believed Nigel Darnley was involved somehow, that he'd discovered the truth too and wanted to bury it. Poirot said nothing for a long moment. Then, "Tell me, Doctor, what was the relationship between Nigel and Iris?" Keswick hesitated. Complicated. She liked him. He was drawn to her. But they argued often, sometimes heatedly. Poirot rose. "Merci, Doctor. You have been most helpful." Later, in the guest chamber where Poirot had been given quarters, he and Japp reviewed the case. "She suspects murder in a 40-year-old case," Japp said. "Finds proof, hints at exposure, then vanishes. Could be coincidence. But that's not how it works with you, is it?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Never, mon ami. Consider this. The Darnleys have reputation and wealth. A scandal would ruin them. Iris Marsh threatened their foundation. Someone, perhaps more than one, had cause to remove her. And Nigel? He is the link between the past and present. I must speak to him again." Night fell thickly, wrapping Vendôme House in gloom. Poirot found Nigel in the stables, brushing down a black gelding. "You ride often?" Poirot asked. Nigel gave a tight nod. "It's the only place I can think." "She admired the horses, Mademoiselle Marsh. Did you ever ride together?" "Once or twice. She preferred walking." Poirot took a slow step closer. "Nigel, she mentioned your name. She trusted you and she feared something. Did you ever read what she was writing?" Nigel's hands stilled. "Once. I shouldn't have. But she left it open. She was digging into family things, old death's secrets. She wanted the truth. And you?" "I told her to stop. I warned her." Poirot raised a brow. "Warned?" "Not threatened," Nigel said quickly. "But I was angry. She didn't understand what this place means to my parents. She was going to ruin everything." Poirot's expression was unreadable. "That is all, for now." As Poirot returned to his room, something sharp caught his attention. A rustling from the library below. Quiet as snowfall. He descended the staircase silently. The door was ajar. Inside, the fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows. And on the writing desk sat a folded paper, recently placed, though no one was in sight. Poirot approached, heart calm, senses sharp. The note was unsigned, written in hurried script. "She is not dead. Yet." Poirot's fingers closed around the page. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "The game changes." Chapter 4. The Stranger on the Hill. The following morning dawned pale and wet. The mists had thinned but not vanished. Instead, they lingered low across the fields, hanging like reluctant smoke over the hedgerows. Hercule Poirot rose early, dressed immaculately as ever, and tucked the mysterious note, "She is not dead. Yet," safely into his pocketbook. Japp joined him for breakfast, eyeing the kippers suspiciously. "So," he said, sipping lukewarm tea, "we've got a vanished woman, an old scandal, a torn note, and now a cryptic message suggesting Iris is alive. Any theories?" Poirot buttered his toast precisely. "Oh yes, mon ami, several. But theories must not run ahead of facts. We must remain logical, precise, methodical." He dabbed the corner of his mouth with a napkin. "Today, we take a walk." Japp groaned. "I hate your walks." The two men set out from the main house under grey skies. Poirot's destination was the northern hilltop overlooking the estate. Once an orchard, now overgrown with wild brambles and wind-twisted trees. A gamekeeper's cottage sat on its ridge, half hidden from view. "I saw it marked on the estate map," Poirot explained. "Rarely visited," said Miss Beamish, "yet it offers an ideal vantage point, and solitude." As they reached the rise, a figure emerged from behind the cottage, startled by their approach. It was a woman, no older than 30, dressed plainly with sharp cheekbones and wary eyes. She held a pair of shears and a basket filled with herbs. "Bonjour, mademoiselle," Poirot said warmly. "You are the groundskeeper here?" "Sort of," she replied. "I keep the kitchen garden for the house. Been here 6 years. Name's Molly." "And do you know the girl who's gone missing?" Her expression flickered. "Aye, Iris. We spoke sometimes when she walked this way. Polite, bit quiet." Poirot tilted his head. "Did she ever tell you of her concerns? Of something she feared?" A pause. Then, "She said she was being watched. Thought someone had followed her. Twice she said she saw a light in this cottage after dark, but I never light it. Don't live up here, just work." "Did you investigate?" "I looked. Nothing. But she was spooked, I'll say that." Japp frowned. "Anyone else use the cottage?" "Not officially, but a while back someone forced the window. I told Miss Beamish. She said it to be sorted, but no one came." Poirot stepped closer. "May we see inside?" Molly hesitated, then handed over the rusted key. The interior was cold and musty. Dust-covered surfaces bore footprints, fresh. Poirot's eyes narrowed at a broken pane near the rear. A torn piece of fabric had caught on a nail, black wool, possibly from a coat. Japp crouched beside a battered trunk. Locked. Poirot reached into his coat and produced a small set of tools. Within seconds the lid creaked open. Inside lay a set of letters tied with ribbon, and beneath them a photograph. It showed 2 young women in 1920s, flapper dresses, one unmistakably Margaret Darnley, the other was unknown. Poirot gently opened one letter. It was dated 1937 and addressed to my dearest sister Genevieve. "Lady Darnley," Japp whistled. "So Lady Darnley and Margaret shared a secret?" "Oui," Poirot murmured. "Perhaps one with consequences." As they turned to leave, a figure approached along the ridge path, walking with brisk, almost military purpose. It was Charles Darnley. "Poirot," he called. "Miss Beamish said you were headed this way. What business have you in the old cottage?" Poirot smiled without warmth. "The business of truth, monsieur. We are very close to it, I think." Charles looked at the open door, then the trunk. His mouth tightened. "This is ancient history. Let it rest." "Would that we could," Poirot replied quietly. "But when the past bleeds into the present, it cannot be ignored." They descended the hill in silence. Back at Vendôme House, Poirot requested Lady Darnley meet him privately in the sunroom. The room was filled with fading orchids and the faint scent of lemon polish. She entered in a pale blue gown, every inch the composed matriarch. "You have questions," she said flatly. "Indeed, about your sister, Margaret." Lady Darnley's eyes turned to ice. "What about her?" "She did not drown, at least not by accident. There are letters, photographs, secrets. Why has this all been hidden?" There was a pause, then a sharp exhale. "Margaret was troubled. She fell in love with someone unsuitable, a stable boy. When she became pregnant, father was furious. She fled. Later they found her body in the lake, but yes, it was hushed, not for shame, but to preserve her dignity. It was another time." Poirot listened intently. "And Iris Marsh discovered this?" "She did. She came to me 2 weeks ago, said she wanted to write a book, a true account. I forbade it, told her it would ruin what peace we had left. She seemed to understand." "And then?" "I don't know," Lady Darnley said softly. "But I did not harm her. I swear it." Poirot studied her. "Sometimes silence is guilt, madam, but I believe you did not act. Others, perhaps, were not so restrained." Later that day, Poirot stood by the drawing-room window, hands clasped behind his back. The estate below stretched quiet and still, but tension clung to it like the mist. He turned as Japp entered. "We must act swiftly, mon ami. I believe Mademoiselle Marsh is alive, but in danger, and someone here, someone desperate, is running out of time." "What's the next step?" Japp asked. Poirot opened the trunk of the mystery once more, his mind sorting names, motives, fears, the black wool, the photograph, the broken glass, the hidden note. "We call everyone together," Poirot said. "Tonight." In the study he raised a finger. "It is time to gather the pieces. The picture is nearly complete." Chapter 5. The Gathering in the Study. At precisely 8 o'clock that evening, the household of Vendôme House assembled in the study at Hercule Poirot's request. The fire was lit, casting flickering light across antique book spines and the glossy mahogany of the large centre table. Outside, the rain began to fall steadily, a persistent rhythm against the window panes. Poirot stood near the hearth, immaculate in a dove-grey suit and patent shoes that gleamed like mirrors. Inspector Japp took up position beside the doorway, his expression unreadable. Chairs had been arranged in a semicircle around Poirot, evoking the air of a courtroom or a theatre. Present were Charles and Lady Genevieve Darnley, Nigel Darnley slouched with a scowl, Dr. Lionel Keswick visibly tense, Miss Beamish stiff and defensive, and Molly, the groundskeeper, who sat upright and silent. Poirot began with a short bow. "Mesdames et messieurs, thank you for coming. I have summoned you not to accuse but to reveal. A young woman, Miss Iris Marsh, has vanished. But we now know she did not simply wander off or meet with a random fate. No, she uncovered something buried in the heart of this family. And for that someone sought to silence her." There was a collective shifting in chairs, eyes narrowing. Poirot lifted a finger. "Let us begin with the past. Margaret Darnley. 40 years ago she died under mysterious circumstances. The story, as told, was that she drowned herself in the lake. But it was not so simple. Margaret was pregnant. The father was a servant, someone dismissed before scandal could spread. She was confined to the East Wing, isolated, watched. And when her shame could no longer be hidden, the family chose silence over compassion." He turned to Lady Darnley. "You knew the truth. The letters found in the cottage prove that. You wrote to her. You begged her not to defy your father." Lady Darnley's face was a study in composure. "I did. I was young, afraid." "Indeed, and someone else knew, someone who watched the disgrace unfold from within the household. A housekeeper, perhaps?" Miss Beamish looked up sharply. "I was not employed here at the time." "But your mother was," Poirot interrupted gently. "Mrs. Beamish, she was Margaret's maid, and she kept her daughter informed. Family stories passed down, eh?" There was a pause. Then Miss Beamish exhaled heavily. "She said Margaret's death was no suicide, that she tried to run, was caught, pushed into the lake," Japp added. "By whom?" Poirot walked slowly across the room. "Now let us return to the present." Iris Marsh began to piece the truth together. She found letters, photographs, but more than that, she found a connection. He pointed to Nigel. "Mr. Darnley, you were close to Iris, very close." Nigel sat up straight. "I liked her, yes, but I had nothing to do with her disappearance." "No?" Poirot asked softly. "Then why did she name you in her journal? Why did she write that you knew what she had uncovered?" Nigel's jaw clenched. "Because I warned her. She didn't understand what dragging this up would do to my family." Poirot nodded. "Exactly, and yet she would not stop. So she left you a note, threatened to reveal it all." He turned to the group. 2 days ago, Iris Marsh was seen near the North Field. She never returned, but yesterday I received a note, unsigned, stating, "She's not dead yet," which means she was taken, not killed, hidden. Charles Darnley stood abruptly. "This is madness! You're suggesting one of us kidnapped her?" Poirot fixed him with a look. "I do not suggest, I know." He stepped to the mantelpiece and lifted a velvet cloth, revealing a silver cigarette case and a scrap of black wool. This was found in the gamekeeper's cottage. The cigarette bears Lady Darnley's lipstick. The wool, torn from a coat found in Nigel's wardrobe. Nigel rose, enraged. "You think I'm holding her in that ruin?" Poirot held up a hand. "No, monsieur, you helped hide her, but you are not alone." He turned at last to the quietest figure in the room. "Molly." The woman stiffened. "I didn't hurt her?" "I believe you," Poirot said. "But you helped conceal her, perhaps out of sympathy, perhaps fear." Molly's hands trembled. "She begged me. She said she needed time, that she had proof, that if she could just bring it to light in the right way, no one would be ruined. I let her hide there. She made me promise not to tell." Japp stepped forward. "Is she still there?" Molly nodded. "I've been bringing her food. She's scared. Said someone followed her the day she vanished. She ran and never went back to the house." Poirot turned to the family. "And so you see, she's not dead, but the motive to silence her remains. Who chased her that day? Who wished to frighten her into silence, or worse?" He paused. "The person with most to lose, the one who committed the original crime." A breathless silence fell. Poirot looked squarely at Charles Darnley. "It was you, monsieur!" Gasps erupted. "No!" Charles shouted. "I was just a boy." "You were 17, Poirot said coldly. "Old enough to follow your father's orders. Margaret tried to escape. Your father ordered you to stop her. You struck her. She fell into the lake. He covered it up. But guilt does not die." Poirot stepped forward. "Iris found a signed confession your father wrote in the days before his death. She showed it to you. You panicked. You followed her. She fled." Charles collapsed into the chair behind him. "I never meant to hurt her. I just wanted her to stop." Poirot nodded solemnly. "But lies breed danger, and silence, monsieur, is never truly still." Japp moved to place a hand on Charles's shoulder. "You'll need to come with me, sir." Poirot looked around the stunned room. "The truth at last," he said quietly. "Now she may return." Chapter 6. The Return of Iris Marsh. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the garden paths glistening and the lake a mirror of clouded silver. Inside Vendôme House the atmosphere had shifted, no longer merely tense, but fractured. After Charles Darnley's quiet confession the previous evening, Poirot had remained in the study long after the others retired, his little grey cells whirring in perfect silence. Now, as the household stirred to life once more, Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp made their way through the dew-covered lawn toward the gamekeeper's cottage. A single lamp burned in the window. At the door stood Molly, looking drawn and sleep-deprived, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "She's awake," she murmured. "Been pacing half the night." Poirot gave a gentle nod. "And ready to return?" "She's frightened still," Molly admitted. "But she said, if the truth's out, she has nothing more to run from." Poirot stepped through the door. The air inside was dry and faintly scented with rosemary. In the corner, seated beside the hearth, was Iris Marsh. She looked pale, her hair pulled back in a rough knot, her eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. Yet there was a steeliness in her gaze, quiet, unbroken. She stood as Poirot approached. "I suppose you're here to take me back." "Non, mademoiselle," Poirot said softly. "I am here to offer you safety." She blinked. "Charles Darnley confessed. He followed you that day?" But he did not find you here. You escaped into the trees. It was Molly who found you, oui? Iris nodded slowly. I didn't know where else to go. I couldn't go to the police. I had no proof in hand, only fragments. I thought if I could find the confession again, I could show it to someone impartial. Poirot gestured to a small satchel in the corner. You still have it? She reached for it, pulling out a folded sheaf of paper, aged but intact. This, she said, was hidden in the book on the Darnley lineages. I took it the morning I left. I was going to bring it to London, but he saw me in the corridor. I panicked. Poirot accepted the document reverently. You were brave, mademoiselle, perhaps too brave. He read it slowly. The writing was slanted, the ink fading, but the words were unmistakable. A dated confession from Lord Alfred Darnley, written just weeks before his death, admitting that his daughter Margaret had died in a confrontation with her brother, Charles, at his behest. It was meant to be destroyed, but Margaret, it seemed, had hidden it away in the hopes someone would one day find it. Poirot carefully folded the paper and placed it in an envelope. The truth has waited long enough. Back at the house, the family gathered once more. Charles had not been arrested. Japp, after consulting Iris and Poirot, had agreed to hold formal action until all evidence was in order. But he remained confined to his rooms under Japp's supervision, and his silence was now the loudest sound in the house. When Iris entered, the room grew still. Lady Darnley rose, visibly shaken. "Iris, my dear—" "Don't," Iris said, her voice steady. "You knew, maybe not the whole truth, but you suspected." Lady Darnley's face crumpled. "I was young. I believed my father, that it was an accident. That silence would preserve us, but it only poisoned everything." "I just wanted the truth," Iris said. "Not revenge, not scandal. I wanted Margaret's story told." Poirot stepped between them. "It shall be, discreetly, if that is your wish, but honestly." He looked to Nigel, who stood by the window, hands clenched. "You, monsieur, knew something was wrong. Why did you not act?" Nigel stared out into the fog. "I didn't want to believe it. I thought Iris was exaggerating. Then I saw the way my father looked at her that morning, like a cornered animal. I should have said something. I'm sorry." Iris looked at him with a flicker of emotion, regret, perhaps, or something softer. Poirot gave a final nod. "Then I believe we have reached an end. The truth has emerged. The silence is broken." That afternoon, Iris and Poirot took tea in the solarium. The sun had finally broken through the clouds, casting light through the glass panes and across the tiled floor. "You know," she said, stirring her cup slowly, "I came here to write a story, something romantic, scenic. Then I found a real one, dark, tragic, but true. Life is often less pretty than fiction," Poirot said. "But truth, it brings peace, even if it wounds." She smiled faintly. "Will Charles be arrested?" Poirot sipped his tea. "Perhaps. But you and I know that he is already imprisoned, in guilt. The law may follow, but for now your safety matters more." She nodded. "And what about the confession?" "It will be preserved," Poirot said. "It will speak for Margaret. The Darnleys may yet choose to reveal the truth to the public in their own way, but no longer will it be buried." A knock came at the door. Miss Lemon, efficient as ever, entered with a telegram in hand. Poirot took it, scanned the message, and folded it with a smile. "Business in Brussels. A stolen emerald, I believe." He stood and extended a hand. "I leave you, Mademoiselle Marsh, not as a victim, but as a voice for justice. Perhaps your story is not yet written, but it begins now." She took his hand. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for seeing me." He bowed gently. "It is the purpose of the little grey cells to see what others miss." And with that, Hercule Poirot turned, collected his hat and walking stick, and stepped into the golden afternoon, already disappearing into his next mystery. Chapter 7. Ashes of the Past. Despite the clearing skies, a kind of tension still hung over Vendôme House. Though Iris Marsh had returned, alive and unharmed, the revelation of Lord Darnley's long-hidden crime and Charles Darnley's involvement had left the household in subdued disarray. Tea was served, but no one drank it. Conversations began and died within moments. The grand house, for all its stone and age, seemed shaken. Poirot lingered longer than expected, declining his early departure to Brussels by a day. He had, as he put it, a final duty of conscience. That morning he visited the old chapel on the estate grounds. It was unused, the family not overtly religious, but the stone building held archives and personal memorabilia in its vestry. Miss Beamish unlocked it for him with the air of someone handling sacred relics. "The Darnleys store the family documents here," she explained. "Births, marriages, deaths." Poirot nodded, stepping inside. The chapel was small and still, sunlight slanting through dusty panes of coloured glass. Beneath the altar was a cabinet with drawers labelled by decade. He opened the one marked 1890 to 1950 and began to search. Within moments, he found what he suspected might exist, a handwritten memorandum by the former housekeeper, Mrs. Beamish, October 22nd, 1937. Miss Margaret fled again. The master was furious. Charles went after her. She didn't return. Next morning, they said she was dead. No one spoke of it after. But I saw his boots, mud, blood. I said nothing. "Forgive me." He folded the paper reverently and placed it in an envelope. Japp met him outside. "Another nail in the coffin?" Poirot nodded. "It proves what we already know, but now from the servants' eyes, always the most observant witnesses." "And Charles?" Japp asked. "Still quiet?" "Withdrawn," Poirot replied. "He eats, answers when spoken to, but says little. It is the silence of someone already convicted by their own conscience." Japp gave a grunt. "He'll likely get manslaughter, not murder. Youth, coercion, old case, but it won't be comfortable." Poirot sighed. Number, but justice, like truth, must never be convenient. That evening, Poirot requested the family gather once more, not for confrontation, but for closure. They assembled in the drawing room, this time in silence. No one objected when Iris joined them, seated beside Nigel. Even Lady Darnley did not protest. Poirot stood before the fire, hands clasped behind his back. "My friends," he said gently, "we have uncovered many things. Ugly truths, yes, but necessary ones. I asked to speak with you all not to reopen wounds, but to offer resolution." He turned to Lady Darnley. "Madame, your sister did not deserve to be forgotten. She deserves memory, dignity. You can still give her that." Lady Darnley's face crumpled, tears brimming. "What can I do now?" "Tell the world," Iris said, her voice calm. "Not in scandal, but in remembrance. Let the village know the truth. Place a memorial at the lake. Speak her name." "I will," she whispered. "I promise." Poirot then turned to Charles, who sat near the window, unmoving. "You were a boy. You obeyed a tyrant, but your silence hurt more than the act itself. You have a chance now, monsieur, to give peace. Confess formally. Let Margaret be exhumed. Let the past breathe." Charles nodded slowly. "I'll do it. I'll tell them everything." Poirot turned last to Iris. "And you, mademoiselle, must tell your story. Write your truth. It is no longer theirs to bury." She smiled faintly. "I will." Japp stepped forward. "I'll arrange for the authorities to take statements tomorrow. No need to disrupt the house tonight." The group slowly dispersed, some in tears, some in relief, but all changed. Later that night, as Poirot sat in the library, Miss Beamish appeared with a small tray. "I thought you might like something, sir. Warm milk and Madeira cake." He accepted it with a smile. "You are kind, mademoiselle." She hovered for a moment. "You've done this house a service, the sort no one asked for but needed." Poirot's eyes twinkled. The truth, once unearthed, does not rest again easily. As she left, he opened Iris's journal once more. There were blank pages now, waiting, not with fear, but with potential. He tapped a finger against the cover. "So many stories, hidden under years of dust," he murmured. "But they do not stay buried forever." The next morning brought clarity. The air was crisp, the sun bright, and the silence no longer oppressive. Charles Darnley gave a full written confession to Japp, including his father's coercion and the concealment of Margaret's death. Lady Darnley sent word to the village rector requesting a service for her sister, and Iris, with Poirot's blessing, prepared to return to London with her manuscript. Poirot stood by the car as she climbed in, her satchel filled with papers. "You've given this house a future," she said, "by uncovering its past." "Sometimes," Poirot replied, "we must walk backward to move forward." She smiled, and the door shut gently. Japp came up behind him. "All wrapped up?" Poirot gave a small shrug. "No case is ever entirely so, but the pain has purpose now." Japp chuckled. "And now you off to chase emeralds in Brussels?" Poirot looked toward the rising sun. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I shall take a short holiday, somewhere quiet, where the past does not whisper through every room." Japp snorted. "You'll be bored in 2 days." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Ah, but I will be bored in comfort." And with that, he stepped into the car and was driven away, leaving behind a house not entirely healed, but no longer haunted. Chapter 8. The curtain falls. 2 weeks later, London's December chill had truly set in. Frost edged the wrought iron balconies outside Poirot's flat, and the windows of Whitehaven Mansion sparkled with condensation. Inside, Hercule Poirot sat at his polished desk, immaculate as always, sipping thick hot chocolate from a delicate porcelain cup. Miss Lemon, efficient and austere, tapped away on her typewriter beside him. He had returned to London quietly. No press announcements, no gloating. The matter at Vendôme House had been resolved, publicly, with dignity. A small notice in the Times had marked a memorial for Margaret Darnley, and Iris Marsh's name had begun to circulate in literary circles as a promising voice in historical memoir. Poirot had declined further involvement. He considered the matter closed, or so he thought. A soft knock came at the door. Miss Lemon frowned. "You are not expecting anyone, monsieur?" Poirot rose and opened it himself. Standing there, bundled in a modest navy coat and hat, was Iris Marsh. "Mademoiselle!" Poirot exclaimed with pleasure. "What a surprise!" "I hope I'm not intruding," she said. "I was passing through London and I wanted to thank you, properly." "But of course," Poirot said, ushering her in. "Miss Lemon, tea for Mademoiselle Marsh, if you please." Iris seated herself near the fire, clutching her handbag tightly. Poirot studied her. She looked older, not in years, but in composure. "You look well," he said warmly. "The country air has done you good." "I feel steady," she replied. "I've written the first chapter of the book. It's not about scandal, you know. It's about silence and the things it costs us." Poirot nodded. "It is a noble approach. One cannot always heal by revelation, sometimes only by understanding." "I thought you might want to see this," she said, producing a small envelope from her bag. Inside was a photograph, freshly developed. It showed the stone bench in the clearing at Vendôme House. Upon it, a new brass plaque had been mounted. The engraving read, "In memory of Margaret Darnley, 1917 to 1937, loved, lost, never forgotten." Poirot read the words with quiet reverence. "It is simple, and it is perfect." She smiled. "Nigel helped me. He's different now, quieter, humble. We write, but I don't know what the future holds." Poirot gave a soft chuckle. "Even the greatest detective cannot predict the matters of the heart, mademoiselle." Iris laughed lightly. "You'll be pleased to know Charles gave a full deposition. The Crown will likely press no further charges. His health is failing, and the public appetite for retribution has cooled. But the truth is known now. That matters more." "Yes," Poirot said. "Truth must come before justice, for without it, justice is only noise." Miss Lemon returned with tea. Iris accepted a cup and sipped, her hands finally relaxed. Poirot watched her over the rim of his own cup. "You are very brave, Mademoiselle Marsh, not because you revealed a scandal, but because you bore the weight of it with grace." She smiled. "You taught me that answers are less important than asking the right questions." Poirot inclined his head. "Ah, but that is the secret of all great detectives and writers." She rose then, setting the empty cup on the saucer. "I should be going. The train to Bath leaves in an hour." Poirot walked her to the door. "I hope this is not farewell." "It's not," she said. "I'll send you the first printed copy." He bowed with formality. "I shall treasure it." As the door closed softly behind her, Poirot stood for a long moment in silence. Then he returned to his desk and opened a small notebook. On the inside page, he scribbled a single line. "Truth lives in silence until someone dares to speak it." Miss Lemon looked up from her typing. "A new case, monsieur?" Poirot smiled faintly. "No, Miss Lemon, only an old one, finding its peace." That evening, the world outside faded into frost and quiet. Poirot donned his dressing gown and sat by the window with a book he did not open. He stared out into the London street, where lamps cast their golden glow across cobblestones and the faint sound of laughter echoed from a nearby cafe. Vendôme House now belonged to time. Its ghosts had spoken, its secrets had been laid bare. He thought of Margaret's solemn eyes in that faded photograph, of Iris's trembling hands clutching the truth, of Charles's broken voice admitting his part in a family tragedy long buried. And he thought of how, even in the finest houses beneath the polish and pride, lie quiet truths waiting for the right question to free them. In the distance, Big Ben chimed. Poirot raised his cup in a silent toast. "To the little grey cells," he murmured, "and to those who dare remember."